Joining us now, the former ambassador to the state of Qatar, who was also a career diplomat. Now, career diplomat means you spent your entire adult life as a diplomat traveling the world as a representative of the United States in the diplomatic corps in the State Department. Joining us now, my good friend, Patrick Theros. Mr. Ambassador, great to have you, man.
John, it's good to be here. Great to have the chance. Enjoy it.
I know. I always love having you on.
Radio talk show.
Well, I learn so much every time you're on, so I really enjoy. I know you're hard to get. You're very busy, but I so much enjoy having you on. So lots to talk about. I want to start with Qatar. The government of Qatar pulls out of OPEC last week. Now, nobody pulls out of OPEC, right? That just isn't done. They've, even through wars and strife and conflict, OPEC is always held together. But Qatar pulling out of it and saying, you know what, we're better off on our own. We don't really want to be entangled with all you guys. It's too political for us. What did you make of this?
Well, I think there's several issues in the Qatari decision. The Qataris have only mentioned one of them, which is that they are, in fact, the market maker in liquefied natural gas. They are the single biggest exporter. And even with our own increase in the states of LNG production exports, they will probably continue to be the biggest LNG exporter. So from their point of view, first of all, being in OPEC as a very small producer doesn't get them anything. Mm-hmm. In fact, it probably exposes them to the Saudis beating them up because they are such a small producer and have such a small voice in the organization. But the other thing is that it also is a move towards their support for cleaner fuels. Natural gas produces something like 60% less carbon dioxide than burning oil and diesel and gasoline and the derivatives of diesel and oil. So from their point of view, it's a gesture towards a cleaner environment. But as I say, more importantly is being such a small player in an organization that is essentially run by the Saudis gets them virtually nothing and probably gets them a lot of flack. Russia is outside. Even Russia, which cooperates with OPEC, is outside OPEC. The United States, of course, which is now the biggest producer of oil in the world, though not the biggest exporter, is outside of OPEC. So, I think the Qataris have just figured out that OPEC does nothing for them and exposes them to some problems.
So what was the reaction of the Saudis when they pulled out? Were they upset with it?
They didn't make any public statements that I've seen, but they're sort of still fuming over the Qataris snubbing them at the GCC summit, which was this week. So I think the OPEC decision got lost in the static.
Mr. Ambassador Theros, can you share with our audience what happened? I know there was a GCC summit. Just walk everybody through what the snub was.
Well, the snub is essentially in the past when the Qataris showed up at a very, very high level, the UAE and the Saudis sent flunkies. So this time around, I think it was a little bit of you can't push us, you can't do that to us anymore. They were probably a little worried that if the Emir showed up, the Saudis would again in the UAE do the same thing and send the flunkies. So they decided to send that they were going to send flunkies. At which point, this is all the Qataris see the Saudis and the UAE using the GCC against them. They have been good members of the GCC. They've paid their dues. They've cooperated. They've done everything. And among other things, they have a very legitimate complaint, which is, according to the agreements between the 6 countries of the GCC, if you have a dispute, you take it through the GCC mechanism.
Right.
Instead, Saudi Arabia and the UAE broke relations, and Bahrain as well, broke relations, declared the blockade, unilaterally without going through without going through what they had agreed to do, which is to go through the mechanisms of the GCC to resolve disputes. So, from the Qatari point of view, if the Saudis don't want to play by the rules, then what good is the organization?
Right. So the snub came because they were afraid that the Emir Al-Thani would get snubbed by, again, meeting with, like you said, the flunkies. So they did the same thing. So then it turned out to be a snub. It turned out to be a snub the other way. Now, when you look at the Khashoggi affair, and you know that Trump's position is he's going to preserve, he says he wants to preserve the U.S.-KSA relationship, strategic relationship, regardless of one person's bad, horrible decision. And I think he's going to stick with that. There's going to be no change other than Congress is likely to get the U.S. out of this war. But the relationship between the Saudis and Qatar is really bad now. The Khashoggi affair, what is the future for these two countries getting back together and resolving the conflict now?
I'm moreover on the pessimistic side, is that the things that the Saudis did, and the Emiratis, but the Saudis in particular did, breaking up families, forcing women who have small children. Let's say there was a case of a woman with married to a Saudi, a Qatari woman, who had two very small children, and they took the kids away from her and threw her out of the country. And this happened a lot. A Qatari friend of mine told me that his sister-in-law went to her brother-in-law's funeral in Saudi Arabia, got permit to go, got to the airport, and then was held up at the airport for 6 hours until the funeral was over. And all this personal stuff that's been, family breakup and so forth, has made it very, very difficult to get any sort of support going for a rapprochement. So even if the Saudis wanted it at this point, I think a lot of Qataris are very deeply scarred by the experience. And unlike Saudi Arabia, the Qatari government, in fact, is very responsive to what its people want. I mean, it's not a republic in our sense of the word, but it certainly is a country where you have government that is responsive to its population. It's not public opinion and polling. It's people actually registering complaints with the government and getting the government to look at them. So it's going to be very difficult to get the Qatari people, public, to accept any sort of reconciliation with the Saudis. And on top of that, I honestly don't know where the Saudi government is going to go on this. It's probably in their best interest to resolve it, but resolving it would require the Crown Prince to step down, which is a blow to his prestige that I don't think he can take.
Well, yeah, because, if they were to lift the embargo and the Qataris haven't done, remember the 10 demands they had? They were all highly asinine. It was almost out of a comic strip. Close Al Jazeera and, give up your sovereignty. It was ridiculous. They were never going to do that. So they would have to lift the embargo with basically going 0 for 10.
Yeah, exactly.
No concessions.
And that's just not going to happen.
John Fredericks Radio Network, and we want to thank Ambassador Patrick Theros for being with us. Always a pleasure to have him.